Louis Vuitton is worth more than $30 billion, making it the most valuable luxury brand in the world. The story begins in the 19th century with a young man who was homeless and hungry, but determined to make something of his life. After years of scraping by doing odd jobs with artists and craftspeople, he was able to learn the trade and launch a billion-dollar luggage business. Louis Vuitton was raised in 19th century Ani, France, by his father, a farmer and hat maker. At the time, many French farmers, including the Vuittons, were struggling to recover economically after the Napoleonic Wars. Louis was forced to help out on the farm from a very early age. He worked tirelessly from twilight till dawn, tending to the land, tending to the animals, and storing firewood. In many ways, Louis's life got more challenging after she turned 10. Both his mother and his father, Remar, died. The stepmother Louis had was as evil as any villain from a storybook. Louis's life was made a living hell because of her, and he finally snapped. Louis left the farm without a trace when he was 13 and made his way to Paris without a penny or a bite to eat. Thankfully, Louis was able to secure odd jobs working for artisans and craftsmen who taught him their trades. Even so, he ran out of money and couldn't afford a place to sleep. He frequently spent the night in the woods, wrapped only in his cloak for warmth. In those days, the first train connecting London and Paris had just opened. As barriers to entry were lowered, the tourism industry began to flourish. Aristocrats pay high prices for handmade boxes, so artisans capitalize on this demand. Paintings, instruments, and even entire pieces of furniture were frequently transported, necessitating sturdy containers. Also, they required assistance in packing their fragile items securely. Louis decided to try to find a job in the trade after acquiring some knowledge of it on his journey to Paris. Thankfully, Louis found employment as an apprentice with skilled worker Michaud Mariot. Louis didn't make much money, but his eagerness to learn paid off in spades, and he quickly became a customer favorite. After that, the French Empress hired him as her personal box maker. Louis's popularity grew after he had worked for the Empress for a year, and he eventually launched his own shop. The standard at the time was for boxes to be constructed of leather and to be rectangular in shape, but Louis came up with some innovative new designs early on that altered the business. The leather wouldn't get soaked because the lids were dome-shaped and water would just run off the top. This made it both difficult and inefficient to stack the boxes. Louis tried many fabrics, including leather, to solve these issues, but ultimately landed on canvas. In comparison to other materials, canvas was easier to carry, lasted longer, and was impervious to moisture. In doing so, box lids became much simpler and flatter, allowing for easy stacking and loading. Even though the color turned gray from the waterproofing agents, the canvas material looked cleaner and more modern. For this purpose, Louis fashioned a slat. The invention of modern luggage can be traced back to his work. Although at first consumers were hesitant, within 2 years it had become a bestseller and a status symbol of elegance and necessity. Louis planned to accomplish the same thing with a brand new invention: handbags. Handbags were frowned upon back then. There were several complaints that they were ugly, cumbersome, and dangerous. Still, Louis saw promise in purses and began creating them out of canvas. These became immensely popular, prompting designers to come up with even more variations for women to wear with various ensembles. When Louis was unable to keep up, he turned to his son George for assistance. George innovated things that ended up being the norm in the business world. He devised a clever lock that converted suitcases into treasure chests. Locks on trunks were often simple and easy to break open in the past. The family's products became even more desirable, but soon after production came to an end. Louis lost his home for a second time when a battle broke out and wrecked his company. Louis's company was thriving when the Franco-Prussian War broke out. Because of the Nazi occupation, Louis and his family were compelled to abandon their workshop and residence in the suburb of Anneux outside of Paris and relocate to the capital itself. In the shelter, they were just one of thousands of people trying to make a new life for themselves. The Vuittons nearly starved to death as food supplies dried up. Louis came back to his family when the war ended. The theft of his supplies and the destruction of his workshop upset him. Louis didn't waste any time using the rest of his savings to reopen his shop in a new location. He lucked out, though, because property values had fallen as a result of the conflict. Louis seized the moment, and he bought the shop in a fancy neighborhood. Within a few short months of reopening, business had picked back up, and orders were coming in from all over the world. Louis realized he needed to take risks and attempt something different. In those days, technology had progressed to the point where one could print their own unique patterns into textiles. Moreover, canvas being the cloth allowed Louis to design a series of trunks with a striped pattern. There was an instant response to the new style. It allowed individuals to distinguish themselves while also demonstrating their modern awareness. Louis's work was also harder to replicate by subsequent counterfeiters as a result. Because of the high demand from overseas, Louis set up shop in London. Because of his business's growth, he was able to attract a wider variety of patrons, such as kings, queens, and adventurers. After that, Louis became famous for being the only designer whose wares could be found in both affluent mansions and remote jungles. After some time, Louis published his first catalog for convenient ordering. That was a smart move that would have taken the company to new heights, but a tragic event occurred that same year to completely derail Louis' plans. Louis, who was in his 70s, died unexpectedly at home. What exactly led to his passing is a mystery. George needed to fulfill his father's projects now. George wasted no time expanding his company and jetted off to the United States to check out the World's Fair. John Wanamaker learned the hard way that he needed a worldwide sales network, and he met a helpful contact at the show who was able to provide him with one. The department store as we know it today may be traced back to John, who also developed the concept of the price tag. He began stocking LV merchandise in his New York department store after meeting George. The shop was the first in the United States to sell the product. For this reason, George designed a floral monogram, including a LNV to honor his dad. The monogram on merchandise came as a surprise to consumers. Bags were previously personalized simply with the owner's name or initials, but that trend shifted as the years passed. Gaston then proceeded to follow in Louis's footsteps and produce similar designs. One of the most notable products is a practical bag that can hold all of your essentials. The Knock, a reimagining of a Coco Chanel commission, and a bag for transporting wine and champagne. In that time, the Alma Headsrich followed in his father's footsteps by touring the United States and establishing a distribution network. He had to take the company somewhere fresh. Yet the same mistakes were made again. Gaston was left on his own to finish Louis's unfinished ideas after he passed away. Took a bad turn in the beginning. Due to the outbreak of World War II, all agreements were terminated. Louis Vuitton, a French tale, ended with Gaston having to close the company's factories and retail outlets. According to the author, Gaston's desperation led him to work with the ruling party for Germany Gas, give the go-ahead for the production of bus, and open a shop in Vichy. The article further states that stores like as Van Sleigh and Arpels were closed down while LV was the only one allowed to remain open. According to a Louis Vuitton representative, "This is old news. We embody the characteristics of a 21st century business: inclusivity, tolerance, and diversity." Henry Schack and Claude would relaunch the business with their dad's help after the war was over with gas stall tests. New Lou models were released annually thanks to the sons, but once Gaston died, the company's fortunes declined and people stopped buying hard-sided suitcases. Henry, Jack, and Claude were at odds over the best way to operate the family business, so they turned to Henry Ray, the husband of Henry's sister. By that time, Henry had already started and sold a successful steel trading business. With his savvy business sense, he shifted LV's focus from wholesale to retail and expanded across Asia. At that same time frame, LV had a 260% increase in sales, from 20 million to more than 260 million. About that time, Henry made LV available to the public. Once almost 1 million shares were sold, the corporation was completely depleted of its equity. The stock price of LV began to vary 2 months later. Since there has been an increase in the number of counterfeit products, experts warned that sales could fall. Henry Ford moved to the Headwood and immediately began establishing retail locations there. In such a short amount of time, he disproved the prediction of the analyst. After reaching over $1 billion in sales, LV combined with Moet Hennessy, a maker of champagne and cognac, to become the luxury goods behemoth LVMH. Avoiding a hostile takeover was a top priority for both firms. Henry had managerial disagreements with Moet Hennessy's president, but the merger had allowed LV to increase its investments. Henry approached Bernard Arnault, a real estate developer, in the aim of recruiting Arnault as an ally in his quest for power. Bernard discreetly bought a controlling position in LVMH for himself and got support from the Moet and Hennessy families soon after Henry understood that Bernard had his own objectives. After then, Henry, Bernard, and Sue got into court. Henry was obliged to resign since the court sided with Bernard. From that point on, LV lagged behind the competition. Sales decreased because the company was seen as being less significant than competing luxury brands. No journalist would be caught dead praising the product. Nothing changed until LV, inspired by Yves Carcel and following in Louis's footsteps, had a breakthrough idea. In honor of its 100th year in business, the firm commissioned a number of renowned fashion designers, including Vivienne Westwood, Isaac, Miss Rai, and Manolo Planet, to make a line of handbags with the firm's emblem. Seldom seen in the luxury industry at the time, handbag partnerships like this were a first for the industry. Yet, the partnership proved successful in reviving interest in both LV and handbags. Marc Jacobs, a designer, was hired as LV's creative director a year later. Marc breathed new life into the company by introducing its first ready-to-wear collection, designing its best-selling Thigh and Eye line, and working with notable artists like Takashi Murakami and Steven Sprouse. Throughout the years following, the company has introduced numerous other accessory lines in addition to its signature handbags, including watches, jewelry, and sunglasses. The all production is still handled in-house at the company. Some items require 300 separate steps to assemble, and the training for the craftsman might take up to 2 years. Currently, LV is the most valuable luxury brand in the world, worth over $30 billion. Herein is recounted the incredible true story of how a homeless adolescent invented modern luggage and sowed the seeds for a multi-billion-dollar business. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel Think Insider for more such type of content. Until we will see you in the next one.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now.